step forward.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the return of the Then and Out podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, C Diesel, and to the left of me today, I have the typical co-host, Lelouch V. We're one short today. Professor E is going to be on the way. He had to do his I'm gonna say Jay Williams. Let's do his name, Jalen Rose shit, and get a crispy cut.
Yo, so do you think that Jalen Rose is like low key capping, and he does get his stuff altered? Because like he's been putting a big emphasis on trying to make sure that people know that his hair is real. Like,
I'm still convinced that is a wig. His like for your line to be
that perfect,
crisp,
bro. Like,
and you want like all the time. Like, granted, I know some dudes that like I used to go like I had a vice principal in high school where he was like that. He was always in a fresh suit and always had a cut, and he was a regular dude. The thing that I call cap on is the fact he's paying $100 every cut. There's no way you're getting a cut that frequently and paying $100 every time. Because at that point, what is he doing to you at that point?
He got the money to do that, and I'm sure that if he is paying $100 per cut, he taking care of his barber because his barber take care of him.
Mm-hmm.
But like his shit be so and like the darkness of that color, bro. Like either
you can tell that
dyeing it or it's what I'm saying. It's Shout out to Jalen Rose though. I'm a big fan, especially of you as a sportscaster, bro. So no shade there, but
yeah. I mean, I'd rather pay $81 for my haircut. Just saying, that's just me though. Hold on. I think you muted your mic, or your mic's out. Yeah, you muted yourself by accident.
It was my cat. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
All
right, but let's go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes of the show, guys. We have a really great show in store for you guys today. We have a special guest coming on later on, and we're going to be discussing a very, very interesting project that we want to talk about and review. So first and foremost, with the project itself. We're going to be bringing back another person's creation, Mr. Carl Jones and his animation studio, Martian Blueberry. They teamed up with the Major League Baseball Association in creation of a mini docu-series called Undeniable, based around the Negro Leagues from the MLB. So if people are not aware what that is, that was at that point in time, baseball was segregated, so we had its own separate league for African Americans playing themselves. So they not only get into the popular African Americans that you obviously know about, like Jackie Robinson, but they also discuss like the women that played with the men in that league as well. So I personally did not know there were women that played in that league. That was the one thing I did not know about. But I enjoyed this project all around. It's only like 4 to 5 minutes per one, and it's only 3 episodes, so it's not super long. So I do the due diligence and going and checking that out. Otis, Lelouch, what was your first impression of the series once you finished this 3rd episode?
So I mean, yeah, like I thought it was really informational. Like I of course I was aware of the Negro Leagues and primarily through Jackie Robinson, but being able to see like their overall impact and influence on the sport, not just specifically for the African Americans in the sport. That was pretty huge. I enjoy. I'm always a big fan of cel shaded animation, so I mean, the animation for it was pretty clean, and overall it was just really informational and just gave me a lot of positive information on some of the things that we've accomplished, through our own endeavors.
All right. So really quickly, let's talk about the animation and get into that discussion point. I love, first and foremost, the shots they animate. I love we talked about it in something else we reviewed recently where I think it was Swarm actually, where we discussed like the overhead shot and the underhead shot. I love how I feel like that made things more dramatic. Like it made the people that use that shot on feel like they were grander than life. And I love how they did that. And then they would bring in the name of that person. So it made that person feel like a superhero, especially for the women. I think Lonnie, oh my God, I'm going to butcher names. I'm not going to butcher names, but Smith Stone, I think is the name of one of the first one they discussed. That was dope. Like her intro for that was sick to me. I love how I just love the animation style. Like it's reminiscent of the Boondocks style to an extent. It's not as like obviously you can tell there's not as much money put behind that as it was the Boondocks, but if you're a fan of the Boondocks series, you will definitely see some inspiration here. Or it's Carl Jones who's involved in the series, so it makes sense that there's some correlation between the two. And to
Right. No, I absolutely agree. And then just like going back into those shots, like it brought my more attention to that than like even like what you typically see in baseball, like
mm-hmm.
because like because it's animation and it's a medium where you can kind of play around with it more than you can with live action stuff, like being able to create scenes that you normally wouldn't be able to get on a baseball field. That was, and also considering the fact that a lot of the stuff that from back then wasn't televised, you're kind of getting to see that on the first time on screen. So that was really
Mm-hmm.
dope. And then, but yeah, like what you were saying, like you definitely saw some reminiscence of the Boondocks in that, which I really appreciated because I mean that's one of my favorite animations.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, just knowing that Martian B was able to collaborate with the MLB to put something like that out, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like a throwaway thing just for like Black History Month. Like this is a piece of content that they really supported. So I really appreciated that about it as well.
Yeah, that's another thing for me too. I would love if the MLB would fund their endeavors of creating a actual like series, like an actual series following one of these infamous baseball players that they brought up. Probably, maybe the women. I'd probably be more interested in seeing their actual life. Something like a biopic similar to 42, but animated and following that individual. I think that would be really dope to see. Obviously, the MLB would probably want them to like, add a coat of paint to some of the stuff, though, where you don't get the full raw way that things were back then. Obviously, I think they kind of did it to a certain extent in this, where they showed you some stuff, but like the fact they just showed a white only sign, they didn't really get into any of the crazier stuff. But
Hmm.
if they can get more raw, I'd appreciate it to an extent. Well, maybe you get into a conversation there about black trauma
Hmm.
porn and things of that nature, but I feel like things like this are needed so this information isn't just kind of glossed over going in the
Right.
future, especially if you're a fan of the sport. I myself am not the biggest baseball fan in general. I have an appreciation for the skill of the sport, but I just don't follow it as much. So for someone that's actually like a baseball head, I feel like you got to do your due diligence to go back and look up this information because it's part of the sports history that you love so much. And I'd be interested to know again if you're a big baseball fan. Let us know in the comments. Did you know about any of this information prior to watching this stuff, or is it something that you just stumbled upon? Because I'm really interested to see if the actual fans know the history.
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, also not a big baseball fan myself. Like honestly, if I had known information like this previous to this, I would have been more inclined to try to at least pay attention somewhat to it. Just
Mm-hmm.
because, like, I mean, the baseball is a sport that I mean, I know that we play in it, like we as black people, but and there are plenty of us there, like the and the ones that are there are notable people within the sport, but it's not one that we've dominated like we've have basketball and football.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I feel like having this information is out there and made publicized on a big medium like this is good. Absolutely, I think that it can encourage more diversity to come to the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And considering like through the information they showed, like how successful we helped to make the sport become, I think that can help us to drive it into a bigger space going forward. Because I mean, at this point, I feel like baseball has partially been eclipsed by the other two major sports in at least in North America. But I mean,
Yeah.
what yeah.
In North America, yes. I think football is obviously third in that hierarchy. If we're talking about baseball, basketball, and football,
Hmm.
obviously football is in the last because it's not international. Internationally, baseball, I think it's possibly still above basketball, right behind football, like the actual football
It's
being
soccer,
soccer.
yeah, yeah.
Um, as far as that goes, because kind of getting into the second episode, which was talking about the international impact that the Negro League had. Obviously, there's a lot of like you see it in things like Family Guy and other shows like that, where they make the stereotypical skits of Dominican and Spanish players being really predominant in baseball itself. I wasn't aware that a lot of that attention and a lot of that popularity to sport came from the Negro League players going to those countries and being heralded as heroes and celebrities there, and that obviously helped to get a lot of people in the sport. as somebody that's a big basketball fan myself, I kind of look at it like somebody like Kobe or AI going overseas, and now you have you like with China, like literally Kobe in China, where Kobe went
Mm-hmm.
overseas and he's like a huge icon over there. They have statues of him, and then I feel like you start to see a lot of international players around maybe like 5 years to a decade ago, where you see like a huge influx of them. Where you got your Rui Hachimiras, your what's buddies that's on the Knicks name? Oh my god, his name slipped me. The Japanese player, Yuta Watanabe. You
Oh,
have
the Brooklyn Nets, yeah.
yeah, you have a lot of players that from countries you normally don't see. Like I can only count one Asian player that I can think of being, well, two being Yao Ming and
Jeremy Lin.
Jeremy Lin. There's another one, Yi something. I can't remember his name.
Oh.
It's Y E something, but Y I something. But players like that, you don't normally see them in that sport. But
Mm.
I think because you have these black athletes that go to these countries and make this impact and show how great the sport can be, it brings interest in, and I think it's
Mm.
positive for the sport. That's again, that's why I'm it make this something like this makes me really proud to be black and be in my skin, knowing that our ancestors and our history made such an impact in not only the sport but the world.
All right. No, I thoroughly agree. Just like understanding that, one, we were the direct catalyst for expanding it to those places because, like, the major league players weren't leaving the country to try to make these appearances. So knowing that the Jackie Robinsons of the world were out there inspiring the international scene to come to baseball, and
Mm-hmm.
then to help elevate it to the level that it's at. Like, in Japan, like, baseball's their second major sport behind soccer now. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that the Negro Leagues directly influence that, like, that's huge. Like, I mean, especially knowing how much the Japanese anime culture has affected me, knowing that we can give something to them in exchange. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's always been pretty dope.
Man, yeah, that's how I feel like that's how the world should be. Just like the exchanging of culture and what you enjoy about it is something that's beautiful to me, and that's why
Mm.
you see. I think in the world now things are so much infused. Like even something like the Boondocks, that's like 100% a lot of black culture. That's the source material, but then you see that influx of like anime, like Japanese animation that's in there
Mm-hmm.
that everybody loves, and it's a reason why it's such a popular thing and it's lasted so long. So
Mm.
seeing that influx on going forward into the third episode, one thing I was also not aware of was how impactful that Negro Leagues were on the black economy. Like obviously, like most people, I knew about Black Wall Street and how successful that was in cultivating black economy and us kind of putting money back into ourselves. I was not aware that the Negro League teams brought in so much attention to that.
Mm.
But you figure, I mean, I kind of understand to an extent how that works for like the NBA, how like a team like the Lakers is probably bringing in a lot of financial capital into the economy of Los Angeles, and like there's a reason they have like four NBA teams, and that's probably one of the reasons why they're one of the bigger money making states in the country because they
Right.
have all these professional teams that are not only popular teams but the bigger popular teams in the world. They're funneling so much money to that place. So seeing something like that being very much equivalent with the Negro Leagues in those black communities, I found it very interesting. Um, and I think I don't know if you've heard about it, but I know there's some places in America are trying to do Black Wall Street to a similar degree. There's like there's a like a town in Atlanta, like a little section of a town where it's like all black people. They built like these really futuristic slash modern style homes, and the whole street is all just like black people there, and they're trying to recreate that to an extent. So it's just cool to see that we're taking stuff like that from the past and at least trying to carry that on in the
Mm.
future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I actually didn't know that about Atlanta, but I mean, if they are, of course, building a physical community for Black people to be in, as well as enforcing the group economics that made Black Street, Black Wall Street what it is, then that's something I would definitely want to support because I mean, we need places for us to establish our own economic growth,
Hmm.
but but yeah, that was a huge like kind of well, I mean, okay. So like I've heard references to like the Negro Leagues in music and in comedy from that time because like my grandparents were really big into you
Hmm.
know Well, my granddad on my dad's side, he was really big into baseball in general. So I mean, I felt like I just thought that he was collecting things specifically that highlighted stuff about the Negro Leagues. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that it was directly impacting the black economy at the time. Like I mean, getting
Mm-hmm.
information like that. I mean, in hindsight, it makes sense just because like now, me being such a big basketball fan like yourself, like I'm starting to be aware of exactly how much money sports generate for an area. Like seeing things like how LeBron brought $3 billion to Ohio, or how the valuation of the Warriors went from a couple 100 million to over 4 billion after the Warriors
Mm-hmm.
stealth run. I mean, so I mean, it is very apparent of how economically beneficial sports can be, but just knowing that that was a main center point of the black dollar at the time, that was a little bit of a bombshell for me. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even thinking about that. But
Right. And
okay, go.
no, I'm saying I won't get too much into the philosophy and the economic philosophy that people have as far as where the black dollar should go and how we cultivate that and things of that nature. I think that's a bigger conversation. I don't know if we have enough time for in the podcast, but um, seeing stuff like this as much as it's entertainment and great educational stuff, I think we need to also use it as a reference to the future. Like, obviously, there's a lot of stuff in the past that needs to be left there, but I think we can learn a lot of lessons from like stuff like this and how we can try to take that, build upon it, and use it in the future. Which, again, being communal and the your economic spending and choosing like, just let's now put $7 billion into Gucci's pocket and look at a lot more black owned brands and black independent stuff. And obviously there's like a bigger conversation about who's actually owning it, but if we can work to get something like that done, I think that will help this us as a people a lot more and end a lot of, not maybe not end, but help in a lot of conversations black people have as far as our disconnectedness from, I don't know if that's even ever a word, but us being disconnected from one another
Mm-hmm.
economically, socially, in a lot of different ways like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that like us as black people are one of the biggest consumers in America. So I mean, if anything that we can do to start shifting that spending into ourselves to help
Mm-hmm.
grow, I mean that can definitely be a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mean that seeing that's exactly how it was done before, like going back to the docu series, like seeing that they were making music around the Negro League, seeing that they were
Mm-hmm.
making restaurants and events dedicated to stuff like that. I think that is something that we can duplicate rather easily,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the amount of black celebrity that we have. Like if we can get somebody like that to somebody of a high level to endorse that and then start the ball rolling there, that can definitely go a long way into
Mm-hmm.
generating some economic growth for us. And in today's world post COVID, we can definitely use that absolutely.
Yeah.
One comment that really stood out to me within that third episode is the fact that when the Negro League was to fully dissolve and go into the major leagues, how
Mm-hmm.
that directly hurt the black economy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you feel about that, Charlie?
It made sense. Obviously, you have people that are the conspiracy theorists and say that was a preemptive, premeditated move to kind of destroy Black Wall Street. Because we already know that was a goal back then at that point in time to kind of break that up because they were making so much money and being so successful. It kind of made me like, I'm curious now as to how that exactly happened. I love to do some research to figure out how that happened on an economic level, but it makes sense that they kind of drowned out. Like I'm looking at like the NBA, right? When you have things like the like the N1 league, or what was Ice, the Big Three league, the Ice Cube has,
Mm-hmm.
where you have these independent, or even the Big Baller League that LeVar Ball had. You have these independent leagues where they can take black talent, because let's be honest, in a lot of these sports, some of the upper echelon talent is black talent, black people, and you take them, like if you like if that's one of the reasons why I think college basketball is on a down to an extent is because you have a lot of these young basketball players who are very talented, and now you have the opportunity for them to either go to the NBA G League directly, where they can be paid a good amount of their like top tier talent, or they can go overseas to where you're taking all the best talent out of these schools. Now you're only going to have a very niche fan base that's going to pay attention to that sport because most people are casual consumers. So they're going to go to where the flash and the popularity and the big names are. You have like with college basketball in general, it's not as popular around the world because it's very niche and you don't give the stars an ability to shine as much. And when you do, you have these large booms in economic. Like when Duke had Zion Williamson, I know for a fact their jersey sales went through the roof, their viewership went through the roof, and they made a lot of money when Zion was there. Or probably even that's why the NBA is probably making a lot of money off of Victor Wembanyama now because they're showing his G League team plays and whatnot. So it makes sense that the major league saw that this was making so much money for these individual black communities. I'm like, all right, logically speaking, economically speaking, how do we mooch off that money that they're making? Because they're making
No,
too much of it.
Mooch.
Let's just take the product that they have there and move it into our stuff so that viewership and that money and that attention comes to us. So now we're getting and generating that fund, those funds that they were getting. So to me, that makes sense there economically now. It's kind of fucked up that that was the thought process back then, but from a economic like business owner level, I can see that being the case.
So, adding a slight tangent and caveat to this, do you think that we need to build more spaces where we are completely, you know, building it, with the black dollar and showcasing it with the black dollar to continue to raise money for that? If that makes any sense, or do you think we should focus more so on inclusion and making sure things are open to everyone?
So I'm very conflicted, and when it comes to that because growing up, my grandfather was very much so pro black everything. We watched even like the bad black films we were watching growing up because he supported everything black from art to music to everything. Bad or not, he was supporting it because it was black. And I hold some of those values to myself as far as black owned businesses and things that black people put a lot of time and money into. But at the same time, I grew up in a military town where I'm used to being around people of all other cultures. I'm also a nerd that loves anime and all kinds of mythology that come from other cultures that we take from. So I'd like to say if we could have the in my perfect world, it'd be something that is black owned, but also has people of these other cultures coming in to make sure that their culture is being used in a honest and well done way that's tasteful. So like we're not just bastardizing their stuff. We're not making something called kimono and putting a brand on it like it's the American original thing. Didn't mean to throw shots at somebody there. But yeah, with stuff like that, I'm very much so pro black, but we can be more open and let other people in to I think that's how you get the best product and the best stuff.
Yeah.
Boondocks being an example there. But I will say on that same accord, we need to as a culture because black people in America we are the ones that direct culture and where it goes. If you're wearing it's like New Balance, like you see how New Balance is starting to come back in the phase and they're probably making a lot of money. It's because now famous celebrities are wearing them, influencers are wearing them, and they're making them look cool again. And not everybody's into that trend, and now New Balance stock and their prices go up.
Mm.
So if we can have these black owned things and people within our culture are actually helping to even just co-sign what we have, that stuff's going to shoot up and that value is going to go up intrinsically from me, my perspective. Maybe it's not that easy, but in my perfect world, that's how things work.
I mean, it's not too far off from the truth, but we won't. We'll do a then and now economics on a different episode.
All right.
For
Going
this,
forward,
but for
yeah.
this episode, if you had to put a rating on this docu series, what do you give it? Undeniable.
To me, I give it a 10. And I know it's going to seem like we're gassing it because we're fans of Carl Jones and what he does, but I wholeheartedly believe that this was a perfect blend of education and entertainment. I didn't feel bored watching these at all. They were like, to me, the perfect length. They weren't super long and it was entertaining and I got intrinsic educational value from them.
I can't actually argue with you here, Charlie. I think I'm gonna go a 9 just because my only complaint is that I want more. Give me another 3
Mm-hmm.
episodes. Continue this series out so we can get more of it. But no, I absolutely agree. They were very entertaining. They were educational. and it made me more curious about the sport, which is I think something that they wanted from this content in general. So in that aspect, it did its job. My complaint:
Mm.
give me more, give me
All
more.
right. So moving forward,
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
and that meaning we have a very special guest coming up. Well, I don't know if you hate it or not. Uh,
Hmm.
we have a very special guest that we've asked to come onto the show. Otis knows. I don't know if you know him very well, but he's either from. I don't know if he's from Chicago or not. I was going to say he's from the city, but
Yeah.
he does something very very dope and very close to our hearts in Chicago. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Craig Bass. I hope I pronounced it right.
You did pronounce it right. Good job.
Perfect. Hey man, how you doing?
Thank you guys. Good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, man. I'm excited to have you on. I know our first initial meeting was relatively soon, but to make the quick turnaround for you to come on the show, I really appreciate, man. So how you doing?
It's an honor to be on. Thank you guys. Doing great. Thank you for calling me a very special guest too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, all our guests are very special, man.
Oh,
Anybody that give a
now I don't feel very special anymore.
well, I say that because anybody that's willing to give us our time to come on our little old platform, I'm very thankful for because it means a lot to me individually. Like whether anybody sees it or not, I appreciate you.
Well, thank you guys for having me on.
Of course. That being said, for Mr. Bass, for anybody that doesn't know who you are, what you do, would you please let everybody know?
Yeah. So I'm a filmmaker from the Chicagoland area, not in the city. Not very far from the city though. We're in Brookfield, and in Brookfield is an arcade called Galloping Ghost, which is the biggest arcade in the world. At I'm
One
gonna
of my
get it
favorite
wrong,
places
but I
ever.
think there's what's that? One of the coolest places ever. Is that what you said?
Hmm.
Yeah, and they're up to something like 800, or excuse me, 920 something games at this point. Every Monday they put a new game on the floor. It's a block long. The venue. And yeah, it's a very cool place. But even more interesting than this is that the owner's been working on his own game for 28 years at this point. And when I found that out as a storyteller, I had to figure out just that. What was the story behind this and what happened to the game? You know, when I found out it was a few years ago and I didn't even know, had the game been done? Was it still being worked on? I figured it had been done and just kind of languished in obscurity. But then when I met the gentleman Doc Mack, who owns the arcade, he filled me in on the fact that the game was still being worked on. So I've never met anybody that spent so much time on any one thing, um, and put so much into it. And I think that that alone made me interested in telling his story.
Okay. So let's take it back to the beginning. Let's go back way back to the wee lad, wee bitty mini Craig. Obviously, to get into stuff like games and filmmaking, you had to have some sort of inspiration growing up in your childhood. Tell us about just your upbringing and like how you got into this, I guess, the nerd space, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So I'm 41. So the big things for me when I was a little kid, the big, inspirational things would have to be definitely NES because I was very young when that came out, and just Zelda, Mario, those the original wave of those games, I was obsessed. And beyond that, kung fu movies, particularly 80s and 90s Hong Kong kung fu movies, Jackie Chan and his, the guys that came up with him, Sammo Hung, Yun Biao, um, was a huge inspiration. I was always a massive fan of martial and Bruce Lee, of course. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's films aren't very good. They're not even very entertaining, most of them. But Bruce Lee is extremely charismatic, and he's an extremely interesting person. So, while the films aren't great, him as an individual has always fascinated me. And then even arcades to an extent. My uncle would take me to arcades when I was little, and this was, I think, even then they were kind of losing steam by the time I was old enough to go. And that was a fascinating place to be. But beyond that, comics for sure, right? And I remember loving Image Comics when they first came out. With that first run of like Gen 13 and Savage Dragon and all these cool new properties. We hadn't really seen a bunch of new properties like that. Bigger than that, actually, something I've neglected, anime. So I fell into anime super
Mm.
young. And you had, Blockbuster Video had like 3 anime, and I would rent them and watch them, rent them and watch them, rent them and watch them. And I started to find out that, at some comic stores in the back of the store on the bottom shelf were bootleg versions of shows that had been subbed by fans in their basements. So started to buy up these obscenely expensive fan sub tapes, then started to trade tapes with people all over the world through the mail. Very different world. The internet's a godsend. So anime was massively, like, especially the 90s, 80s and 90s anime, super, super influential. I don't know if I'm missing that. Those are the big things for me, the big nerd things.
No, you're definitely on line with us a lot. So I mean, to make the step from being a consumer of all these things to being a creator of, like, stuff within itself is a huge jump. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you actually want to start, making things yourself as opposed to just watching it like everyone else does?
Yeah. I mean, I think my best friend Steven always says nobody tells a child to draw. Every kid just draws. And I think that's true for all of us. You just do it instinctually. It feels right to create. So I actually think making that movement into doing things, actively being involved in creative pursuits, it's really kind of the natural state of all of us. I mean, I would assume all of you, including me, were making movies in your head as a little kid. We're drawing things out. And that was just always the way to be. And when I was 10, I started making kung fu movies with my best friends. Their dad would film it on the old VHS camera. We'd score it by having a TV in the background with usually Street Fighter on, and I'd just let the Street Fighter music play as we pretended to fight, and then we were just live scoring these ridiculous films. But we would draw our own comics. We would draw our ideas for video games, and you just create naturally as a child. The question is, why is it that when we start to get older, creation turns into something that we see as work? It's too much work. It's too, why do we step away from it? So I've just kind of always been in the headspace that if there's something I love, I want to do that thing. So, and I'd rather make a movie than watch a movie. Being creative is I love watching movies. I'm a cinemaphile. I love watching film, but the act of doing is so much more fulfilling than the act of consuming. So I think that I don't know. I think it's totally natural to do these creative things. It's what is the force, and I haven't completely deciphered this. What is the force that works against us and convinces us as we get older not to do these things, to just consume, not to create any longer?
So to play off that point, obviously, as all 3 of us here know, when you're creative, you hit that wall every now and then, where you're burnt out or it's stressing you out. Do you feel like you hit that wall, and how do you stay motivated to just create consistently, or do you take breaks in here and there?
No, I mean, I think everybody hits that wall, but what do they? Somebody had a great quote, and I can't even paraphrase it now, but it was basically like, inspiration is inconsequential. You just keep going at it. You get up and you do the work. So that might be the thing. When you're a kid, you draw because you seemingly instinctually have this, you're compelled to create, and you draw when you want to draw. I guess that's a big difference when you get older. And maybe that's why people start to perceive these things differently. Once you start to make a life out of these things, or you start to make a habit out of them, you have to do it whether you want to do it or not some days. So I don't think there's any secret. I think that's just it. You have to do it whether you want to do it or not. And some days it's immensely fulfilling and fun, and some days it's exceptionally painful and it's a massive struggle, and it's like pulling teeth. I don't worry as much. I don't get the blocks as much as I used to, but that's also a function of, if you're doing the work continuously, you're not just waiting for inspiration. I don't know. I think things just come easier on average. It's like it's like lifting weights. It's your creative muscles. Once you build them up, they can support you most of the time. You're still gonna have some bad days where you can't lift as heavy, but in general, you've become stronger and everything's a little bit easier. So I wish I had a better like cheat code for, you know, what do you do when you get blocked up? But I think it's working at it. When the pandemic came, I started writing a novel, which I never finished, unfortunately. So it's half written. But I had a goal for myself, and it was 2,000 words a day. So that might take, I mean, I don't really remember, but let's say you're flying, maybe that takes 2 hours or something, right? An hour. And then some days it would take like 5 hours, but I held myself accountable to 2,000 words a day, you know, and that was my method at that time to push me forward. And yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a cheat code, but I think a lot of it is just keeping at it and accepting the fact it's going to be hard sometimes. That's, I think, one reason we turn away from these things, because the moment they're not just pure fun anymore. Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But I'm not really looking for fun. I'm looking to be fulfilled. And on that path, I'll have fun. There will be days when we have a lot of fun. But being fulfilled has always been infinitely more important to me than having fun. Because fun will come and fun will go. It'll be there. So I think the most important part is to apply yourself diligently to the craft and accept that some days it's going to suck.
I apologize for coming in late, Craig. I am the,
No
I'm the
problem.
third host. Ironically enough, you're talking about how hard it is to follow, pursue, and be involved with the craft. And I'm half an hour late or more. So yes, shame on me for that. LA traffic hates me a lot in the face. But so from what I understand, though, you actually own the world's greatest and the most amazing arcade with over 10 billion arcade machines in it. You've made 17 million films to this week. You've written 17 books. Yeah. So it's all these wonderful things. It's great. Thank you so much for being on the show. But I'm just curious, real quick, just for my own personal gratification, what are you most proud of that you've done as an artist, creator, owner?
Well, and I don't own it, so I'm making a film about the guy that owns the arcade. So I'm just a filmmaker.
That's perfectly fine.
We'll get to that more in a little bit, but
yeah. What am I most proud of? Probably what I'm working on right now, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but most of my life had a hard time with finishing things. So I had a million ideas, and I'd work on something, and then when it got hard or when things didn't go my way or whatever, it's like, let's move on to this. Now, when I got older, when I started my own business doing video production, I had to finish things because people were paying me to finish things. But then I also started to learn how to finish creative work as well. And I'm just telling you how I didn't never finish my book that I started writing, but maybe one day. But I think that I've been working on this film for almost 2 years. I've spent $60,000 of my own money, which could sound like a lot or a little, but it's all I had to put in, and I don't have anymore. And I think that I've put thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into this. And a lot of those hours, nobody cared at the time, right? I'm sitting here in my office for 5-6 hours straight, translating notes that I took while I was working through the story of this and looking for inspiration and structuring things. And so I think that sticking with this project for so long is actually a huge victory for me. Mm-hmm. I've proven to myself that I've grown and I'm more mature and that I can really go the distance on things. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think that what I'm doing now brings me the most pride because it's perhaps forced me to grow more than any other project.
You could say you could. I'm not saying that you should say, but I'm saying you could say that you're most proud of your own growth, that you matured into a more consistent artist, which is great.
Yeah, frankly, I hate all my work. I don't know if you guys are artists, you probably feel the same way or you don't, but everything I do, I hate. When you look back at it, you can never materialize the thing that's in your mind. So I just keep moving forward. That's I don't spend a lot of time looking back. I'm not saying looking back is a bad thing by any means, but for me, there's plenty of new ideas. So if we finish this, we do the best we can, we put it out there. If I look back on it too long, I just see the difference between where I'm at now and where that, and where that.
Mm-hmm. That's like my biggest struggle. I'll do video essays on the channel every now and then, and if I ever show one to somebody, I have to turn it on and then run away because I want them to see it, but I don't want to see it because I don't want to be reminded of stuff that I messed up on.
Right.
Similar. I have similar tendencies. Yes.
I'm not sure if Otis and Charlie talked to you about this before, but did you guys cover like imposter syndrome as well? Where you?
Nope.
We have not.
I wasn't sure if that's something you may deal with yourself, Craig. Where you, just what you just said just there, it kind of reminded me of imposter syndrome, where you feel like you are incapable of doing whatever you did before, or that you're not good enough to do it again, or that you will be found out as being, a fake. Like people are like, oh my gosh, Craig is the most amazing filmmaker of all time. You're like, I'm not. I am the saddest person in the world. And you bury your head in the sand for a while. Has that ever happened before too?
I don't know about the imposter part in the sense of, I don't know that anybody's thought I was the greatest filmmaker of all time. So I don't know that I uphold any vision that people have of me. But I think for me, what I struggle with is when I see something that speaks to me, I feel a compulsion to be of that caliber. And I might be watching a film that somebody made and they'd been making films for 25 years or something. And then they made this film, but I still feel, and this probably, I mean, this doesn't do me any good to feel this way, but I'll feel like, hey, I want to make something that, stands against it. Again, I brought up my best friend, Steve, earlier, and he has illustrated a comic, an indie comic. And he was telling me at one time when they were making it, he said, I don't want to just make something that's good enough. I want to make something that can sit on the shelf next to my favorite books. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, for him, his favorite books were mainly Marvel. So that there was a tall order to match that level of professionalism, right? So I don't know that I ever feel like the imposter thing very much. I'm lucky to not suffer from that too much. I think I feel the frustration at my own limitations constantly, right? That I want to be X and I'm just not there yet. Either I haven't been doing it long enough or I'm just different, whatever the case may be. I don't think it's helpful. You know what I mean? I think it's, this isn't something that I'm particularly proud of, and I don't think it helps anybody. But if anything, maybe I think sometimes talking about these things and you guys bringing these things up is great, because other people certainly feel similarly, and this way they feel like, oh, it's not just me. There's not something wrong with me. It's not just me. Like all these other people have these same feelings. So I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
Now, a question that I have for you, Craig, because I know before when we talked, you were telling me about how so many of the projects that you had made early on in your career that you hated, like you didn't enjoy being on those at all. Can you tell us a little bit about those and how they helped to prepare you to create the documentary that you're working on right now?
Yeah, here's maybe the most important thing to mention is, when I was 9, so I dropped out of high school. I had a terrible high school experience. I had a broken family. My adolescence was a mess. So I dropped out of high school and I want to be a filmmaker. I certainly don't have money or the means to go to film school, but I still have this feeling that I want to be a filmmaker. So at one point, I was able to get a fairly inexpensive digital video camera. This is forever ago, so old DV camera. And I was ignorant, so I thought all I need to do is to make a movie. Hey, I'll shoot a documentary, because you don't need a cast, you don't need a cinematographer, you don't need a sound guy. You just need a camera and a mic, and you film life. Mm-hmm. And it's that simple. And I decided I was going to make a movie about, at the time I'd gotten my GED and I had gotten into community college. And I had this philosophy professor that was just a very interesting fella. He was a German expatriate. He had lived on he just had a wild story. He had been a theater actor. He had lived on American military bases in Morocco, selling goods to soldiers that he would, I don't know, find in the desert, or and then he had these just interesting ideas on philosophy. So I thought, hey, that's an idea for a documentary. You know what I mean? And I'll just follow him around and I'll film it. And then the documentary will come. Well, that's certainly not how it works. So that kind of fell apart because I had a very ill-conceived idea of how that was going to go. And that was hard. It was hard to sort of fail, right? That's what we talk about. That was total failure. And I even went to Italy for this. He was doing this meaning of life thing in Italy. And it was my first time out of the country. I got on a plane alone and flew out there and was there a week with my camera. And, a lot went into it. But then my next pursuit. I took some time away, and I'm just like working at a restaurant at this point, trying to cut my teeth, hone my craft. And I have another idea for a film. And this is when cosplay wasn't, I was probably 24 or so at this point. So 41 now. So cosplay was around, but it was mainly present in the anime community, and it was big in the anime community, but it hadn't even really broken much into like the Comic-Con community, certainly not the public eye. So I thought, man, I'm going to make a documentary on cosplay. I'm fascinated by it. One, I have this history of loving anime, so seeing people bring these characters to life is really cool. Two, I've always had a fascination with human behavior, and in fact, when I was sort of at my lowest point, thinking I'll never be a filmmaker, there's just no hope, my intent was to potentially go into anthropology and study human culture and human behavior, which, if you think about it, documentary is really just a cinematic extension of anthropology. Analyzing, cultures and subgroups and stuff. But anyway, I thought this is a really cool phenomenon, and it probably has some roots in what it means to be human, because you look at a lot of indigenous peoples putting on masks, becoming the spirit, or becoming different. There seems to be our outfits seem to have a deeper significance. Our appearance, sometimes the appearance that we choose to take on, seems to have a deeper significance. So I thought, this is great. I called it the art of actualization, and kind of a pretentious title, but I'll get in there and we'll do this film. And I shot for at least 3 years. I was a waiter at night. I would put all my money that I'd pay my rent and stuff, and then I'd put everything else into the film. And I got 2 other guys involved that I ended up meeting, who both had film degrees. And we shot forever. And we made relationships with so many people, went to so many cons, spent so much time, ended up with 280 hours of footage. Jeez. And then
oh my God.
It was, but here was the problem. One of my co-directors said, look, man, we need a conflict. We don't have a conflict. We're just following people around, talking to them, learning about their lives. I said, dude, documentary is all about purity. Stop trying to force your ideas, your conflict. It's just, well, here's the thing. He was right. Stories are only conflict. If you don't have a conflict, if you don't have struggle, you don't have a story. I was wrong. We've got 280 hours of footage, and I'm starting to come to the realization that I've been too stubborn and I'm wrong. And now how do we find a story? And then my co-director, who I was mentioning, has a psychotic breakdown, and he loses his mind. He starts thinking that people on the L train are letters in the alphabet of God, and he loses his mind. He's a great guy, but he has deep psychiatric issues. And there was another fellow that was acting as a producer. He steals all the footage and absconds to Las Vegas and says he's going to sell it to Comedy Central for God knows why. Comedy Central didn't want it anyway, and he was nuts. The whole thing implodes. And this 3 years of my life, all my time, all my money, these like relationships I had built, everything is just up in flames.
Jesus.
And I was like, I never want to do a documentary again, And those failures definitely shaped who I am now, the work that I do now, the way that I perceive art now, all of these things. I feel like that didn't exactly answer your question, but the point I'm trying to make is like, who was I? I was talking to somebody about failure yesterday, and it's like, the people that succeed are the people that are willing to fail. Because I could have given up, and I thought about it. So I thought, I'm just not good enough. I'm an idiot. First of all, I'm an idiot, because these fundamental aspects of storytelling, I let go to the wayside. That's what I'm thinking, right? And then it's just, right, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not, whatever it is. And I really, really was like ready to just be done. Like, I'm not good enough. It's time to be done. But I wasn't done. I took a break a little bit, but I wasn't done. And had I allowed that failure to hold me back, obviously I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So it definitely has shaped me. So I don't know. The moral of the story is like, be prepared to fail hard. But this is cliche. The true failure is not getting back up. You know what I mean? But failure is an integral part of developing as an artist and a person, right? So that was a lot of probably what shaped where I eventually got. And then the rest, a lot of it is craft, right? You get way better, everybody has a craft. And you really should always engage in continuous education, right? So you're honing your craft, you're getting better, you're getting a deeper understanding, you're learning new skills. That's important. If you don't do that, then shame on you. And then you continue to work through time. And when you look back at your work a decade ago, you're like, oh my God, like I had no idea how to light things properly, or why did I do that? Or why did I think that was okay? And like you had said, not everybody else feels that way. Most people are going to be way less critical than you, but it definitely, I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just rambling.
You're fine.
I love it. I love the irony of you talk about failures and you fail to address the question, but it's still it's all nebulous. So it's awesome. It works.
Thank you, man.
To redirect things, Craig, could you give us some information and advice? Because you got into a lot of the inspiration for your past projects, but for your current project, Ghost Lord and the Quest for the Dark Presence, could you give us like a background on maybe your inspiration for that, or what the process has been to get that worked on?
Yeah, just to be conscious of time, because I know I've been rambling. It's really, I heard the story from somebody. So there's a video game called Dark Presence. It's been being worked on for 28 years. It is in the style of the original Mortal Kombat, where it's real people filmed on green screens. The green screens are removed and you play as those real people. Okay. This game has been refilmed 3 times. There have been wealthy Texan investors. David Lynch's production company offered money for the story. There's been 13 iguanas acquired in the process. There's been potential curses involved. There's been mystery illnesses. There's been the creation of the world's largest arcade. Galloping Ghost did now over 920 something games. All of these were stories spun out of this quest that this man, Doc Mack, has been on for 28 years to finish this game he envisioned as a 17-year-old. When I first heard this, that it was just that. Like, there's no inspiration. It's, wow, that's a great story. And I don't start with themes. For me, I don't really believe in that. A lot of people preach themes, start with themes. So if our theme is love conquers all, that's where we start, and then we build up from there. No, is it an interesting story? If it is, then it grabbed me for some reason, and there's something that, and then when we start to dissect it, not to get too gross, but pick it apart and dig into it, themes will start to pop out. So it was really just, I heard this from somebody that was in the game when she was 17, now 30 something, and at the time pregnant and a teacher. And when she told me that she had been in an abandoned warehouse on a green screen in this kind of scandalous outfit with a very spiky weapon being filmed by Doc Mack, owner of the largest arcade in the world, when he was much younger, I was like, oh, okay, wait, what happened? And that's kind of what inspired it.
So could you give us where will people be able to find this? And do you have like an estimated time of when you think it'll be done?
Right now, so I mentioned earlier, I basically spent all my money on it. So we are fundraising. And so it's on Kickstarter right now. We're fundraising. So if you go to ghostlordkickstarter.com/start, which I'm sure you guys can put this in the notes.
So, yeah. I'm going to have the link for this in the description of the video. We put it up.
Awesome. So go to the Kickstarter. There's a trailer at the top. We have about 130 hours of footage right now. We've done about 45, 50 interviews and a lot of filming over the last 2 years. You can see the trailer. That's going to explain the story, the feeling, the idea, everything much better than I can explain it here. So I encourage everybody to go there, check out the trailer. If you're there and you check out the trailer and you're like, I want to get involved, I want to give, awesome. We've got something like 9 days left, and out of $60,000, we have 45. So we're doing good, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. When it's going to be released, I don't know. I think it's the next step is getting the funds. That's what we're working on now to finish it off. When we have those, we'll be, we're still working. I mean, we shot an interview yesterday and we're shooting one tomorrow. So there's still I'm still putting resources into it and moving it along, but it has to be what it has to be. You know, I have a vision in my head for it, what it is, and it can't be any less than that. And then it's just about, I mean, anybody can relate to this. It's just about resources at that point. Can we get the money together to keep working on it? I would love to say that it would be out within a year. That I don't really want it to take longer than that. I always say I don't want this to be my dark presence. You know, I don't want this to take me so long, because there's other thing. I'm already writing a script for an indie film, you know, and then there's other documentary ideas I'm talking to people about and starting to do some preliminary investigation into. So while I love the story and it's been a great experience, every story needs to end at some point, and then you move on to the next one.
All right.
So hopefully soon. Yeah, relatively soon.
I know myself, I'm very interested to see this. I'd love for this to come to full fruition. So again, if everybody wants to support that, we'll have the link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video. So again, go show some love, go support, so we can get this done. And if it is finished in time and you have it out on platforms, we'd love to cover it and probably have you back on so we can discuss just the making of it and the story itself, if you'd love to come back for that.
Yeah, always. I've put so much into this. I don't mind talking about it. It's what I've spent most of my time doing for the last 2 years.
Awesome.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you giving us your time, your blood, sweat, and your energy for this really dope conversation. So guys, getting to church announcements, we have some things coming up that we're going to be working on soon. I have a video on the Renaissance, or at least my personal Renaissance of horror, coming out soon. DBZ documentary and its effect on Black nerds is still being worked on. And we have some other tasty treats and morsels that may be coming your way. You never know. But again, thank you guys for your support. We hope for your continued support, and we'll see you guys next time on another episode of the Then and Now podcast. Peace.
Beach.